11:47 p.m. The rain carved silver streaks down David's face as he turned the final lock at Millbrook Supermarket. Another endless shift. Another empty parking lot stretching into darkness. The broken streetlight flickered once, died. Then came the sound, soft, desperate, cutting through the storm like a blade. He froze. There, crumpled against the dumpster, sat a woman who didn't belong. Designer heels, silk dress clinging to trembling skin, manicured hands pressed against her mouth to stifle sobs. But her eyes, God, her eyes held the kind of terror that money couldn't buy and power couldn't protect against. When David peeled off his worn security jacket and draped it over her shoulders, she looked up at him like he was her last breath of hope. "Sir," she whispered, voice fracturing with each word, "please don't let them take me." In that moment, neither of them knew that a forgotten night guard was about to become the most dangerous man in America. David knelt beside her, rain soaking through his uniform shirt. The woman couldn't be more than 35, but exhaustion had carved years into her face. Her clothes screamed wealth, the kind that came with corporate boardrooms and private jets. Yet here she sat in a puddle behind a discount grocery store, shaking like a lost child. "Ma'am, are you hurt?" His voice carried the gentle authority of someone who'd spent 3 years raising a daughter alone. She shook her head, dark hair plastered against pale cheeks. My car won't start. I don't have anywhere else to go." The lie sat heavy between them, but David had learned not to press when people weren't ready to share their truth. He helped her to her feet, noting how she moved with unconscious grace despite her fear. The parking lot offered no shelter, and his beat-up Honda Civic waited in the employee section like a faithful old dog. "I can give you a ride somewhere, or call someone for you." She glanced around frantically, as if shadows might spring to life. "No calls. Please." Her desperation reminded him of Emma during thunderstorms, that same raw need for safety without questions. "Okay," he said simply. "No calls." Something in his calm acceptance made her shoulders drop slightly, the first sign that her guard was lowering. The drive to his apartment building passed in careful silence. David stole glances at his unexpected passenger, watching her study the modest neighborhood through rain-streaked windows. Millbrook wasn't much. Working-class families, small gardens, the kind of place where people minded their own business, but helped when asked. She seemed to drink in the normalcy, like medicine. When he parked beside Mrs. Patterson's house, she turned to him with something approaching wonder. "You live here?" Not condescending, just curious, as if she'd discovered a hidden world. "Third-floor apartment. It's not much, but it's warm and dry." He paused at the building's entrance. "I should mention, I have a 9-year-old daughter, Emma. She's asleep, but just so you know." Emma wasn't asleep. She sat on the couch in her favorite pajamas, a science textbook open on her lap, brown eyes wide with curiosity as David entered with a stranger. "Dad, you're late. And wet." And her gaze shifted to the woman behind him, taking in expensive clothes and trembling hands with the sharp observation children possessed. "This is Kate," David said, the name she'd whispered in the car. She needed a place to get out of the rain. Emma's face lit up with the uncomplicated kindness she'd inherited from her mother. "Hi, Kate. Do you want hot chocolate? Dad makes the best kind with marshmallows." Kate stared at the child as if she'd never seen one before, then something cracked in her carefully controlled expression. "I'd like that very much," Kate whispered, and Emma beamed. David watched this interaction while toweling his hair, struck by how naturally his daughter offered comfort to a stranger. Sarah had been the same way, heart open to anyone who needed shelter from life's storms. The thought brought its usual stab of loss, but also something new: pride. Emma was growing into someone beautiful, someone who saw people's pain and wanted to help. As Kate accepted a steaming mug with shaking hands, David caught her studying the modest living room. Family photos on the mantel, Emma's art projects taped to the refrigerator, a chess set missing 2 pawns on the coffee table. She looked like an anthropologist discovering a lost civilization. What kind of life had she left behind? That simple human kindness seemed so foreign. 3 days passed before Kate spoke about anything beyond pleasantries. She'd been staying on their couch, despite David's offers to find her a motel room or contact family. She claimed her purse had been stolen, along with her identification and credit cards, leaving her stranded. The story had holes, but David didn't push. He'd learned during Sarah's illness that sometimes people needed time to find words for their pain. Kate made herself useful, cleaning while he worked, helping Emma with homework, cooking dinners that revealed a sophistication his usual mac and cheese couldn't match. She moved through their small space with careful gratitude, as if afraid that too much comfort might make her unwelcome. Emma adored her immediately. Kate listened to 9-year-old explanations of scientific theories with genuine interest, helped with art projects without taking over, and seemed endlessly patient with questions about everything from quantum physics to why boys were weird. David would come home from his security shifts to find them building elaborate structures from Emma's blocks, or Kate explaining the periodic table using kitchen spices. "She's really smart, Dad," Emma confided one evening as they cleaned dishes. "And sad, but she's getting less sad each day." Out of the mouths of babes. David had noticed the same thing, how Kate's shoulders gradually unclenched, how genuine smiles began replacing polite ones, how she laughed at Emma's jokes without that split-second delay of someone remembering how to be human. The first crack in Kate's careful facade came during a trip to Millbrook's farmers' market. Emma had dragged them both to see the weekend vendors, chattering excitedly about Mrs. Chen's honey stand and the organic vegetables she wanted for a school project. Kate moved through the modest crowd like she was walking through a museum, studying faces with fascination. At the flower vendor, she stopped abruptly. "Peonies?" she breathed, reaching toward white blooms with trembling fingers. "My mother grew these." The vendor, a weathered man named Tom, smiled broadly. "Beautiful choice, miss. These are local, grown right here in Connecticut soil." Kate's hand snapped back as if burned. Connecticut. David filed that detail away, noting how she suddenly seemed eager to leave. That evening, as Emma worked on homework, David found Kate standing at their small kitchen window, staring at nothing. The setting sun caught gold highlights in her dark hair, and for the first time, he noticed how beautiful she was beneath the exhaustion and fear. Not magazine beautiful, but real. The kind of face that told stories if you knew how to read them. "You okay?" he asked quietly. She turned, and he caught something raw in her expression before she shuttered it away. "I was just thinking about peonies. Funny how smells can transport you back to being 7 years old, picking flowers with your mother." Her voice carried weight, not just memory, but grief. "Sarah loved flowers," David offered. "Our tiny balcony was packed with pots. Emma still talks to them sometimes, tells them about her day." Kate's face softened at the mention of Sarah, the first time she'd seemed genuinely curious about David's past. "Tell me about her." They sat at the small kitchen table, Emma's homework providing gentle background noise, and David found himself sharing memories he'd kept locked away. Sarah's laugh, her terrible cooking that somehow always tasted perfect when made with love, the way she'd dance while folding laundry, grabbing Emma for impromptu waltzes around the living room, how she'd faced her cancer diagnosis with fury rather than sadness, angry at missing Emma's future, not afraid of her own ending. Kate listened with absolute attention, occasionally asking gentle questions that showed she understood the difference between losing someone and having someone taken from you. "She sounds extraordinary," Kate said when David's stories wound down. "Emma has her eyes, and her spirit, I think." David nodded, throat tight with emotion. "Some days I look at Emma and see Sarah so clearly it takes my breath away. Other days, I worry I'm not enough, that I can't give her what a mother would." Kate reached across the table, covering his hand with hers. Her skin was soft, unmarked by manual labor, but her grip was strong. "You're raising an incredible human being, David. That doesn't happen by accident." The compliment hit differently coming from her, someone who clearly understood the weight of responsibility, even if he didn't know the details of her own burdens. The evening Emma got sick marked the turning point in their careful dance around each other's secrets. It started with a fever that spiked suddenly after dinner, followed by chills that had her teeth chattering despite David's efforts to warm her up. Kate took one look at Emma's flushed face and went into crisis mode with an efficiency that spoke of experience. "We need to get her to a hospital. Now!" Her voice carried absolute authority, the first time David had heard her speak with such command. Within minutes, she'd called a cab, wrapped Emma in blankets, and was cradling the semi-conscious child while barking directions to the driver. At Millbrook General, she moved through the emergency room like she owned it. The triage nurse took one look at Kate's expensive clothes and immediately upgraded Emma's priority. Dr. Martinez, the attending physician, treated Kate with a deference that seemed odd for someone whose only identification was a story about lost purse. Kate rattled off Emma's symptoms in medical terminology that made David's head spin, asked pointed questions about treatment protocols, and somehow managed to get Emma admitted to a private room that David knew their insurance wouldn't begin to cover. "Don't worry about the costs," Kate said when David started to protest. "I'll handle it." She produced a platinum credit card from seemingly nowhere, the kind that didn't have limits and certainly didn't belong to someone stranded without identification. David stared at the credit card in Kate's hand, noting the name embossed in elegant script. Katherine E. Morrison. Not Kate Miller, the name she'd given him. Katherine Morrison, a name that sounded familiar in a way that made his stomach clench with unease. While Kate spoke with doctors about Emma's condition using medical knowledge no ordinary person possessed, David stepped into the hallway and pulled out his phone. A simple Google search for Katherine Morrison made his world tilt sideways. CEO of Morrison Industries. Forbes list of most powerful women in America. Net worth, $2.3 billion. Recent headlines about her mysterious disappearance from a board meeting 6 weeks ago. Corporate lawyers searching for their missing executive. The woman caring for his daughter in the hospital room wasn't Kate Miller, struggling stranger. She was Katherine Morrison, one of the most powerful people in the country. David walked back into Emma's room on unsteady legs, seeing Kate, Katherine, with completely different eyes. The expensive clothes, the casual way she'd handled the hospital fees, her knowledge of medical procedures and corporate efficiency. Everything clicked into place with sickening clarity. This woman who'd been living in his home, eating at his table, reading bedtime stories to his daughter, had been lying about everything, not just her name, but her entire identity. When she looked up from Emma's bedside, with genuine worry creasing her features, David felt the foundation of trust they'd built cracking beneath him. "We need to talk," he said quietly. Outside. The hospital corridor stretched empty at 2 a.m., fluorescent lights casting harsh shadows on their faces. Katherine stood with her back against the wall, and for the first time since he'd found her in the rain, she looked like the powerful executive she actually was. "You know," she said simply. It wasn't a question. David held up his phone, showing her own corporate headshot from Morrison Industries' website. Katherine Elizabeth Morrison, CEO, missing for 6 weeks. His voice sounded hollow even to his own ears. Who are you really? And what are you doing with my family? She closed her eyes as if gathering strength for a conversation she'd been dreading. When she opened them again, the vulnerability was back, but tempered now with something that looked like relief. My name is Katherine Morrison, and I'm exactly who those articles say I am. I built Morrison Industries from my father's small manufacturing company into a Fortune 500 corporation. Her voice carried the weight of someone accustomed to boardrooms and billion-dollar decisions. 6 weeks ago, I walked out of a meeting where my own board of directors was planning to sell key divisions to overseas investors, eliminating thousands of American jobs to pad their quarterly profits. When I refused to sign off on the deal, they began questioning my mental state, suggesting I was suffering from exhaustion and poor judgment. The words came faster now, as if released from a dam. I realized they were building a case to have me declared unfit, to force me out and install someone more cooperative. David leaned against the opposite wall, trying to process the magnitude of what she was telling him. So you ran away? Katherine laughed bitterly. I prefer to think of it as strategic withdrawal. I needed time to gather evidence of their conspiracy, to build a legal case before they could destroy me professionally and personally. She gestured toward Emma's room. I never intended to involve anyone else. I was supposed to lie low, maybe stay at a small hotel under a false name. But then my rental car broke down in that parking lot. And you... Her voice softened. You offered me your jacket like it was the most natural thing in the world. When was the last time someone showed me kindness without wanting something in return? Everything you told us was a lie. David's words came out harsher than he'd intended, but the betrayal felt like a physical wound. Katherine flinched as if he'd struck her. Not everything. Kate Miller might not be my real name, but the person you've gotten to know. She's more real than I've been in 15 years. The way I feel about you and Emma, that's the only honest thing in my life right now. She stepped closer, and he could see tears threatening at the corners of her eyes. David, I never meant for this to happen. I was supposed to stay a few days and disappear, but Emma makes me laugh like I haven't in years. And you make me remember what it feels like to be valued for who I am, not what I can do for someone's profit margins. How do I know what's real? The question hung between them like a challenge. You have billions of dollars. You could buy this entire town. What am I to you? Some kind of anthropological experiment? Rich woman slumming with the working class? Katherine's face crumpled at his words, and for a moment she looked as broken as the night he'd found her. You're the first person in 20 years who's asked me what I want instead of telling me what I need to do. You're the man who gave his coat to a stranger without asking questions. You're the father who works 3 jobs to give his daughter every opportunity, who talks about his late wife like she was a gift from heaven. Her voice broke on the last words. You're everything I never thought I deserved. Before David could respond, Emma's voice called from the hospital room. Dad? Kate? Where are you? They both turned toward the sound, and David saw something in Katherine's face that looked like panic. What does this mean for Emma? Katherine asked quietly. She's gotten attached. She calls me her bonus mum sometimes when she thinks I can't hear. The words hit David like a physical blow. Emma, who'd lost her mother so young, had been allowing herself to love Katherine. And now they were facing another loss, another person torn away from their small family. I don't know, he admitted. I honestly don't know. They returned to Emma's room to find her sitting up in bed, fever broken, but eyes bright with worry. Are you fighting? She asked with the directness children possessed. You both look sad. Katherine sat on the edge of the hospital bed, taking Emma's small hand in hers. Sometimes grown-ups have complicated problems, sweetheart. It doesn't mean anyone did anything wrong. Emma studied Katherine's face with 9-year-old wisdom. Are you going to leave us? The question hung in the air like a sword. Katherine looked at David, then back at Emma. I might have to. There are people looking for me, and I don't want to bring trouble to your family. Emma's face fell, and David felt his heart breaking all over again. The next morning brought trouble in the form of 3 black SUVs parked outside David's apartment building. Katherine spotted them from Emma's hospital window and went pale. They found me. Her voice carried resignation and fear in equal measure. Within an hour, the hospital lobby filled with people in expensive suits, lawyers, corporate executives, and security personnel who looked like they could bench press small cars. Leading them was a woman in her 50s with steel-grey hair and eyes like winter storms. She introduced herself as Patricia Wells, senior partner at Morrison Industries law firm. Miss Morrison, she said with the tone of a disapproving parent, you've caused quite a stir. Katherine stood in Emma's hospital room like a defendant facing judgment. Emma clung to David's hand, sensing the tension even if she didn't understand its source. Patricia Wells launched into a practiced speech about corporate responsibility, fiduciary duty, and the chaos Katherine's disappearance had caused. Stock prices had plummeted. Major deals were stalled. The board of directors was considering emergency measures to maintain stability. You have obligations, Wells concluded, to 50,000 employees and millions of shareholders. Personal feelings are a luxury you cannot afford. Katherine listened with the expression of someone receiving a death sentence. When Wells finished, the room fell silent, except for the beeping of Emma's monitors. I need 5 minutes, Katherine said quietly. 5 minutes alone with my friends. Wells checked her watch with obvious irritation. Ms. Morrison, the corporate jet is waiting. We have a shareholders' meeting at 8 a.m. tomorrow. Katherine's voice turned sharp, carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. I said 5 minutes. Unless you want to explain to the board why their CEO had a nervous breakdown in a hospital room, you'll give me space to say goodbye properly. Wells's eyes narrowed, but she gestured for the others to step outside. When the door closed, Katherine turned to David and Emma with tears streaming down her face. I have to go, she whispered. If I don't, they'll destroy everything I've worked to build. 50,000 people depend on Morrison Industries for their jobs. Emma's lower lip trembled. But we depend on you too. Can't they find someone else to run the company? Katherine knelt beside the hospital bed, smoothing Emma's hair with gentle fingers. Sometimes grown-ups have to make hard choices, sweetheart. But I want you to know that these past weeks with you and your dad have been the happiest of my life. She turned to David, and he saw the woman he'd fallen in love with warring with the corporate executive she had to be. Thank you for showing me what a real family looks like. David felt something break inside his chest. So that's it? You just walk away? Katherine stood slowly, transforming back into the powerful woman the lawyers expected. What choice do I have? You were right yesterday. I have billions of dollars and you work security at a grocery store. I live in boardrooms and you live in the real world. Maybe it's better this way. But her voice shook on the last words, betraying the pain she was trying to hide. Emma sat up straighter in her hospital bed. That's stupid, she announced with 9-year-old bluntness. Money doesn't make someone a good person. Dad always says it's what you do when nobody's watching that counts. Katherine smiled through her tears. Your dad is a very wise man. A sharp knock interrupted them. Patricia Wells peered through the door window, tapping her watch meaningfully. Katherine straightened her shoulders, and David watched the transformation complete itself. The vulnerable woman who'd shared their dinner table disappeared, replaced by a corporate CEO worth billions. She kissed Emma's forehead gently. "Be good for your dad, okay? And remember that bonus moms never really leave. They just love you from farther away." Then she turned to David, and for a moment, her mask slipped. "Thank you for giving me a home when I needed one most." Before he could respond, she was gone, swept away by lawyers and executives toward a life he couldn't begin to understand. Emma cried quietly as they watched the SUVs pull away from the hospital parking lot. David held her close, his own heart breaking as Katherine disappeared back into her world of power and privilege. "Will we ever see her again?" Emma asked. David didn't have an answer. How could he explain that sometimes love wasn't enough to bridge the gap between different worlds? That night, after bringing Emma home from the hospital, he found Katherine's expensive scarf folded neatly on the coffee table beside a handwritten note. "Thank you for reminding me who I want to be. Take care of each other. Kay." David held the silk fabric to his face, breathing in the faint scent of her perfume, and wondered how someone could become so essential to your life in just a few weeks. 2 weeks passed in a haze of normal routine that felt anything but normal. David returned to his security shifts, Emma went back to school, and they both pretended not to notice the Katherine-shaped hole in their daily lives. Emma stopped setting 3 places at dinner. David stopped automatically buying Kate's favorite coffee creamer at the grocery store. They were adjusting, moving forward, learning to be a family of 2 again. Then, on a Tuesday morning that started like any other, David's phone rang while he was getting Emma ready for school. The caller ID showed a number he didn't recognize, but the voice on the other end made his heart stop. "David, it's Katherine. I need your help." Her voice sounded different, strained, frightened in a way that reminded him of that first night in the rain. "Where are you?" he asked, stepping into the hallway so Emma wouldn't overhear. "I'm in New York, but I won't be for long. David, they're going to destroy me. The board has fabricated evidence that I've been embezzling funds. They're planning to have me arrested tomorrow morning." The words tumbled out in a rush. "I have proof of their conspiracy, documents that show the real corruption, but I need someone they can't buy or intimidate to deliver them to the FBI. Someone they would never suspect of being connected to me." David's grip tightened on the phone. "What are you asking me to do?" "I'm asking you to save my life," Katherine said simply, "and the lives of 50,000 workers whose jobs they'll eliminate once they gain control of the company. I know it's too much to ask. I know I have no right after lying to you, but you're the only person I trust, the only one who's not part of their world." David closed his eyes, thinking of Emma getting ready for school in the next room, thinking of their quiet life that was finally finding its rhythm again. Getting involved would mean danger, complications, possibly putting his daughter at risk. But it would also mean Katherine might come home. "What do you need me to do?" he heard himself saying. The plan Katherine outlined was both simple and terrifying. She would upload encrypted files to a secure server, then send David the access codes. He would download the documents and deliver them to FBI agent Sarah Collins, who'd been investigating corporate corruption cases. The evidence would prove that board members had been selling company secrets to foreign competitors while planning to frame Katherine for their crimes. "They think I'm friendless and isolated," Katherine explained. "They'll never suspect that a night security guard from Connecticut has the power to destroy them." David found himself oddly proud of her faith in him, even as the magnitude of the task settled on his shoulders. That evening, after Emma was asleep, David sat at his kitchen table with a laptop Katherine had arranged to be delivered, along with instructions that read like something from a spy movie. The encrypted files contained years of secret communications, financial records showing illegal transfers, and recorded conversations that would send half of Morrison Industries' board to prison. As David copied the files to multiple flash drives, he understood why Katherine had been so frightened. These people had been willing to destroy her reputation and freedom to cover their crimes. They wouldn't hesitate to eliminate anyone who threatened their carefully constructed conspiracy. The next morning, David called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years and drove to the FBI field office in Hartford. Agent Sarah Collins was younger than he'd expected, with sharp eyes and the demeanor of someone who'd heard every lie ever told. "Mr. Thompson, I understand you have information regarding corporate fraud at Morrison Industries." David handed over the flash drives and a written statement Katherine had prepared. "Katherine Morrison asked me to deliver these. She says they prove she's being framed." Agent Collins plugged in one of the drives, and David watched her eyes widen as she scrolled through the evidence. "Where is Ms. Morrison now?" she asked. "I honestly don't know," David replied, which was the truth. Katherine had insisted on keeping her location secret to protect him. Within hours, the news exploded across every major network. FBI raids on Morrison Industries headquarters. Board members arrested in coordinated sweeps across 3 states. Katherine Morrison cleared of all charges and reinstated as CEO by emergency shareholders' vote. David watched the coverage from his apartment while Emma did homework, feeling surreal pride in the woman he'd helped save. The reporters called it the biggest corporate scandal in decades, but they had no idea that the key evidence had been delivered by a night security guard whose most exciting previous day had involved catching teenagers shoplifting candy bars. 3 days after the arrests, David's doorbell rang at 7 p.m. He opened it to find Katherine standing in the hallway, looking exhausted but triumphant. She wore jeans and a simple sweater instead of her usual designer clothes, and her hair was pulled back in a ponytail that made her look younger. "I told you I'd come back," she said softly. Emma's shriek of joy from the living room could probably be heard 3 floors down. "Kate! Kate, you're home!" The 9-year-old launched herself into Katherine's arms with the full faith of a child who'd never doubted that good people eventually return to the people who love them. "I resigned as CEO this morning," Katherine said later, after Emma had fallen asleep between them on the couch, exhausted by excitement. "The board that betrayed me is gone, but I don't want to go back to that life. I've liquidated most of my assets to create a foundation supporting working families, healthcare, education, job training. I kept enough to live comfortably, but not enough to buy senators or small countries." David studied her face, looking for signs of regret or uncertainty. Instead, he saw peace. "What will you do now?" he asked. Katherine smiled, the first completely relaxed expression he'd ever seen from her. "I was hoping to convince a certain security guard to let me stick around Millbrook, maybe find a small house where a bonus mom could help with homework and terrible jokes. The foundation will need a director," Katherine continued, her business mind automatically solving logistical problems. "Someone who understands what working families actually need, who's lived the struggles we're trying to address. The salary wouldn't make you rich, but it would be enough to quit the night security job." David felt his heart racing with possibility. "You're offering me a job?" Katherine laughed, the sound bright and uncomplicated. "I'm offering you a partnership, in business and in life, if you'll have me." She took his hand, fingers intertwining with the natural ease they'd discovered weeks ago. "I know who I am when I'm with you and Emma. I want to be that person for the rest of my life." Yet when a year later, the Morrison Family Foundation had helped over 2,000 families across New England. Their small office in downtown Millbrook buzzed with activity as social workers, job counselors, and educational specialists worked to break cycles of poverty and provide real opportunities for advancement. David managed daily operations, while Katherine handled the legal and financial complexities, their different backgrounds creating a powerful combination of street-level understanding and systemic thinking. Emma, now 10 and fierce with pride about her parents' work, volunteered after school and had become the unofficial foundation mascot, charming donors and legislators with equal ease. The evening news was covering the foundation's latest success story, a single mother who'd used their job training program to become a certified medical technician. When Emma looked up from her homework, "Mum, Katherine, are you glad you stopped being a regular CEO to become a helping CEO?" Katherine, who'd been officially Mom Katherine since their small wedding ceremony 6 months ago, considered the question seriously. "I used to measure success by how much money the company made. Now I measure it by how many people we help build better lives. It's much more satisfying." Emma nodded sagely. "Dad always says the best job is one that makes the world a little bit better." David smiled from the kitchen where he was preparing dinner, still amazed by how naturally their family had grown together. Their house, a modest colonial they'd bought together in Millbrook's family neighborhood, bore little resemblance to the corporate penthouse Katherine had left behind. Family photos covered the mantel, Emma's artwork decorated the refrigerator, and the living room bookshelves held an eclectic mix of children's literature, business strategy guides, and David's collection of mystery novels. Katherine's old chess set sat on the coffee table, the missing pawns replaced with wooden pieces Emma had carved in art class. It wasn't the life anyone would have predicted for a former billionaire CEO, but it was exactly the life Katherine had discovered she wanted. On quiet Sunday mornings, when Emma slept late and the foundation office was closed, Katherine would often find herself marveling at the strange path that had brought her to this contentment. The night she'd fled her corporate life in terror, she never could have imagined ending up in a small Connecticut town, married to a former security guard, helping raise a brilliant 10-year-old who called her Mom Katherine and meant it with her whole heart. The power she wielded now was different from corporate authority. It was the power to change individual lives, to offer hope where there had been despair, to prove that good people working together could make impossible things happen. David still kept the security jacket he'd given Katherine that first rainy night, now hanging in their bedroom closet like a monument to the moment their lives intersected. Sometimes Katherine would hold the worn fabric and remember the terror and desperation that had driven her into his world. Then she'd look around their home, filled with Emma's laughter and David's quiet strength and her own deep sense of belonging, and understand that being broken apart had been necessary before she could be rebuilt into someone worthy of this love. The scared woman who'd begged, "Please don't let them take me," had been transformed into someone who could never be taken from the family she'd chosen and who'd chosen her in return. Emma's voice from the kitchen interrupted Katherine's Sunday morning reflection. "Mom, Katherine, Dad's making pancakes and he says to tell you they're shaped like dinosaurs because I requested educational breakfast food." Katherine laughed, leaving her memories behind to join her family in the warm, chaotic reality of their everyday miracle. As she entered the kitchen to find David flipping prehistoric pancakes, while Emma provided scientific commentary on Jurassic period dietary habits, Katherine realized that she'd finally learned the difference between being powerful and being untouchable. Power could be taken away by boards of directors and stock prices and corporate coups, but being untouchable, that came from having people who loved you enough to fight for you, no matter what worlds tried to tear you apart. In this kitchen, with these people, surrounded by dinosaur pancakes and 10-year-old wisdom and the steady love of a man who'd seen her at her most vulnerable and chose to stay, Katherine Morrison had become absolutely, completely, forever untouchable.